In our continuing look at small arms developed by a special operations executive during World War II, we've got two very unique small arms here. One is called the Norm Gun, and the second is a modification of the Norm Gun called the Welgun. Both of these were created at Station 9 by a certain SOE operative named Eric Norman, who was the designer there. So the Norm Gun was an interesting contraption that was essentially made to accommodate the needs of SOE operatives during World War II, where they needed a small 9mm submachine gun that weighed less than 10 pounds and would be more compact and superior than the Sten gun. From SOE accounts of the development of the weapon, we have this quote: "This requirement was met by the beautifully made and in some respects novel Norm Gun, which completely fulfilled the specification, but was unfortunately too expensive to be put into mass production." Although the weapon had a somewhat awkward appearance, experts who fired it claimed the grips gave them excellent stability and accuracy. This was from the words of one of the fellows who worked at SOE during the development of the Norm Gun. The design of the firearm probably wasn't very conducive to being very reliable and just looked kind of awkward. We'll see this again with the Welgun, in that SOE probably prided themselves a bit too much on the fact that they were bringing this to market and they were bringing this for usage in World War II. However, we have to step back for a second and realize, all options were on the table in this war. So the Norm Gun ran on a central tube and was cocked by using an overclasped fist. There was no safety on the Norm Gun, but there was an automatic selector on the left side, of which you have to press down with your thumb in order to actuate it on fully automatic fire. This lever was the only thing that separated a single shot from an automatic shot. Pressing it down actuated it on fully automatic, and having it on single, you just didn't press the lever at all. Once cocked, it fired from an open bolt position with the chamber and the magazine completely exposed to the elements. Really, the only thing holding the bolt to the rear was a small catch with the trigger. And how it worked was a little bit different than an open bolt Sten, in that as the bolt would ride forward, it would make connection with the breech face, and there's a little pin on the bolt face that would make a connection with the breech. This would allow the firing pin to go forward at the same time that the bolt hit the breech, thus allowing the round to go off. Kind of awkward in a little bit, but it seemed to have worked, and it seemed to have been a little bit accurate as well. One of the other odd features of the Norm Gun, it had these cooling fins around the barrel that was just past the chamber. These fins were similar to that of 1928 Thompson, and past that it had a grip that folded out to the right. This would probably be useful for a left-handed shooter holding it with his right hand, but for a right-handed shooter, this would be very difficult to grasp, and I'm not quite sure what Eric Norman was trying to get across here with having his grip on the opposite side, where the majority of SOE agents were probably right-handed. Anyways, the story of the Norm Gun ends with it not really being adopted, and it didn't really go into serial production. Essentially, it was looked at and they said, yeah, this is probably an alright design, but it needs some more work on it. And this is what we see in the Welgun. So the Welgun was a modified Norm Gun. Initially, SOE wanted a modified Sten Mark II, but instead made a submachine gun of their own. It was designed and produced in 1942 to 1943. Initially, 60,000 were wanted, and then this was up to 100,000. Also, initially, BSA, Birmingham Small Arms, was supposed to be one of the original producers of it, but it turned out never to have reached serial production. It was initially evaluated by the Royal Navy to replace the Lanchester submachine gun, and it was also evaluated by 6.2 Commando. Both apparently favored it a lot. Now, the Welgun did have a number of advantages over the Norm Gun. It looked a little bit more reliable, a little bit more rugged. It didn't have an open compartment that would allow the entire breech, chamber, bolt face, and magazine to be exposed to the elements, as it had a little cover that went over it. You cocked it via this circular bar that ran through the top of the bolt, and that's what you use to pull the bolt into its open bolt position. In addition, the Welgun actually did have a safety, or a locking bar, as we can see. The locking bar was on the right side of the submachine gun, and essentially it either locked the bolt forward so you couldn't cock it and it couldn't accidentally discharge, or you locked the bolt to the rear while in an open bolt position, and it was a true safety. In addition, it also had the same fully automatic selector that was on the left side. We believe it used the same magazine as the Norm Gun, although I don't know for sure. It also had a buttstock that folded over the top of the submachine gun and flipped in just underneath the front of the rear sight. Underneath the barrel was a wooden piece that allowed for some grip of the firearm during operation as well. In the end, although a number of different entities really liked the Welgun, to include the Royal Navy, the Royal Marines, SOE, some entities even in Canada, the final verdict was that in the final total score, the Sten gun beat the Welgun by only 1 point, but the Welgun won the trials regarding accuracy, control, rapid operation, etc. It was beaten by the Sten on operation in Arctic conditions, mud, and sand tests, but the Ordnance Board agreed that greater clearances between moving parts would overcome this. This is a quote from a book written about SOE. Thus, at the end of the day, the Welgun was really beaten out by cost over the Sten. It was much cheaper for the British government to produce and buy Sten guns than it was to produce Welguns, and essentially all serial production never began, and what we were left with are the prototypes that we have today, which are in the Royal Armories. So as a further bit from SOE, we have this sentence as well. One may speculate that the final choice was influenced to some degree by envy that a gun developed by an outside body with no long-term experience of small arms should have been able to challenge the competence of the gun-making establishment. So I'm looking at this quote and I'm seeing this as sort of SOE's jab at saying, hey, we tried to produce something, but you shut us down anyways because, evil British government. Either way, both of these, the Welgun and the Norm Gun, are now artifacts of history and are very essential and important parts of the Second World War, in that we see some of the opportunities that the clandestine services used to try to influence small arms design. Thanks for watching, guys, and I really appreciate your viewership. While I've got you here, I would really like you to take a look at Proxibid. They're a firearms auction website, and they really help us support the channel, and they really help us bring this kind of content and this kind of quality to the channel for your enjoyment. In addition, I'd also like to thank the Royal Armories and the National Firearms Center in Leeds in the United Kingdom for allowing me to spend multiple days there taking videos and documenting some of these extremely important artifacts of the Second World War. Until next time, I'd like you all to be safe.